and we're going to sit a couple of weeks, couple of months, about 2 months, and talk about it. We're going to tell the story about this Avadim Ayino Leparo. We were slaves to the Pharaoh, and and yet we are redeemed. 7 weeks later, just about, we go to the mountain. Uh, he gives us the Sera Divros, and it reminds us that we were taken out of Egypt. Big thing, almost basically the first of the Asserted Divros. Um, and in the Asserted Divros, it reminds us that who took us out of Egypt. And then when we get down to talk about Shabbos Day, which we heard yesterday, the entire Asserted Divros, but we get to Shabbos. It's interesting thing about it. You would think, I mean, I thought you would probably think that Hashem would say, "Oh, this slavery was terrible. They were cruel to us. They were mean. They were whatever else you want to say. The work was backbreaking and terrible." And he would say, "No more slavery. He would just abolish slavery." I mean, you'd almost think that that's what he would do. But yet we see in the Shabbos, when it talks about Shabbos, says we're supposed to remember and keep, depending on how you want to play that. As while he was talking about it on Friday, he said it at the same time. However, you believe that to have happened, uh, slavery is there, but it's actually given a new life that we never had in Egypt, that we did not have in Egypt. What it is says is that if it says is that on Shabbos we get the slave. If you're a slave, you got the day off with the animals, with the daughter and the son, the whole the constant the household. There's no slavery, and the Ramban's kind of qualifies that and says pretty much it's the it's an basically totally it's an evidivary. Some slave has been circumcised or whatever. Even a Kanani slave, some of them were circumcised to be kept into the family, but especially the evidivary. Uh, and so what's what we have? We're not doesn't abolish the slavery, but he allows it, and he gives the slave uh, new rights. He gives him rights. You have the right to take a day off, a right of labor. Probably you would all could almost say, and I saw it in one of the Sfarim that I looked up. I think it was Shimon Schwab. I went through where he was talking about. He has a little thing in the back of his Sefer on the Seder, and he's talking when he talks about this. This is the beginning of human rights, the rights of a slave. Slave had rights. It wasn't a slave. A slave was not put on the auction block. It's not like you would see in if you see movies and read about Southern slavery in the United States. Wasn't put on an auction block. Big strong guy. Look at this. He could do all this work for you. She's she might make a lot of babies for you, and you make in addition to all the work that they were going to do. This was nothing like that. The Beit Din, what basically happens is that the Beit Din is going to sell he's going to sell, and this is a new form of probably a social contract, if you want to look at it like that, because there is no I think that what I wrote in my thing here, there's no Bureau of Prisons or the Rock Department of Corrections. You sold sold to a family, coming to land. And this is, if you're a thief, perhaps you would work back what you stole. A person who is in need might sell himself, sell his daughter into slavery. Um, and and as I said, there was a sense of dignity in it. It's something that the baked in. We talked about the baked in. That would be one of their one of their jobs would be to sell the Evid, especially the Evid Ivri, uh, into slavery. The uh, the Evid. Where did I see this? In the Gemara, in the Talmud, Kedushin 22a, the Eved is going to get treated better and than the master. It's going to be almost as if the master has a master, basically. That's what it will. If whatever the master gets to eat for dinner, slave sits with him and eats it. If he eats steak, he gets steak. If he gets bread, he's supposed to get. He doesn't get the cheap bread. He gets the finest bread. He gets the best part of the salad, the best whatever the master's going to get. The slave gets. The eved is going to get. Um, And there's also the whole thing goes along with, I think you see in the Gemara, it talks about if the owner has a bed, if the master has a bed, the new bed, so does the Eved. Everything is there. In fact, the Talmud says, as I said before, the master gets a master. And the Eved is supposed to serve essentially for 6 years. But if he says, because he's been treated, and the Gemara puts it in this form, basically says that all of the fine things that that the Eved's going to get, he might have been given a wife. If he comes in with the wife, he goes out with his wife. If he comes in alone, he goes out alone. So if the master gives him a woman, a wife, somebody to be his wife, and he has kids with her, and he doesn't want to leave because they don't go with him. He says, "I love my master and I want to stay." And this is a problem, and the law basically, the what happens if he doesn't want to leave? If he firmly says after being asked constantly that he wants to leave, what does he say? He says the Bet Din takes his ear, takes him to a door, and pierces his ear by the door. Now, why the ear and why the door? Two questions that actually, two of the questions, part of what I got from my son's little speech there, probably with a slightly different explanation, but the ear was the ear, the ear. I mean, the old man was at signing, but his ears heard what Hashem said. And rather than, and he has been through the entire process. He was at the doorpost. Why is he at the doorpost? The lintel where the blood was put on, the doorpost and the ear. The ear is heard at Sinai. The doorpost is where he put the blood on the doorpost, and that was basically where they were. Basically where the freedom started, where the Jews basically became a free people, right at that doorpost. That was where they became involved. That was the first time they were actually involved in the process. Talked about that many times before. That was what happens at the doorpost. and so not to become, and why another reason perhaps why it's at the doorpost, because they do it at the doorpost, perhaps on the street, passerby might see what's going on and say, "What? Whoops! What are you doing?" Say what I watch what I say. Be nice. Uh, and the door, and hopefully a passerby will remind him, "What's going on? Why are you doing this? We're supposed to be free." Uh, and why 6 years? 6 years of servitude, according to the Midrash Rabbah. That's what I got from my son's speech. 6 years remind us of the 6 days of creation. When God did his work for 6 years, and the seventh year, and in the seventh year, seventh day, he stops. And that's the seventh year that the slave would go free. If the slave decides not not to go, as I said, his ear, they call it his ritzia, his ear is pierced, and he stays, up until the Avel, to the Avel, for the 50 years. He stays for 50 years, whenever that happens. That's almost basically figured, in all likelihood, that's going to be a lifetime for him. So it's pretty much for those times, it's a lifetime sentence. And with all of this, slavery pretty much takes on a new meaning. Slavery, and historically, keep in mind, just to go back to the beginning a little bit, what I may have missed before, uh, in the whole history of slavery for the Jews, going up to uh, Hagar was a slave, Yosef was a slave in Egypt, and so what we see here, is a whole new meaning for slavery. Master, there are laws, and I sort of not going to get into them. Laws on if you sell your daughter if you sell your daughter as a slave, hopefully that she'll get as a maid servant, so she'll find a husband. If you There are laws on all sorts of forms of how slavery is supposed to work. And it gives, as I mentioned before, the whole process, the whole system gets new meaning. The master was not to abuse his authority. If he knocks out a tooth, or he damages or hurts the Eved goes free, debt paid. Um, and probably even more important than that, not abusing your authority. I saw this, and I wrote some of it down, but I'm going to look it up here just to make sure I got it right. And we don't read this Haftorah too often, because Sefer Mishpatim this year is going to be on Rosh Chodesh. Some years it would have been yesterday. So we don't often read that Haftorah, but the Haftorah that actually goes with it, and every time I take a look at it, it's kind of disturbing, because it deals with the Eved Ivri, because with the Eved Ivri, the heart of this Haftorah is kind of scary, and they sort of add a little piece on it, so there'd be hope. There'd be a little bit of hope to it in it, and the Haftorah is from Yirmiyahu 34:8, and it's a story that goes from Yirmiyahu, gets the word from Hashem. He is a Novi, and as we know, the Novi often, as with David, as his Navi comes to him says, "Hey, look what you're doing. Look what you did." And David goes, "I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I'm wrong," and he does tshuva. But here, I think it's a little different story. Uh, Melech Tzidkiyahu. This is people who are in Yerushalayim. He supposed to proclaim freedom for every man that's who has a bondsman and a bondswoman, a Jew and a Jewess is what it says here. No man. In other words, he's not supposed to slave him. All the leaders of the entire people and the covenant hearkened that they were supposed to set free their bondsmen. I think that they may have been abusing their authority, their power, as we said, they're not supposed to happen. But they reversed themselves and brought back the bondsman and the bondswoman. In other words, they freed them, and then they said, no, you're not going anywhere. Like what we call them today, Indian givers. And the word they were freed. Then back to Yirmiyahu, saying, "So says Hashem, I sealed a covenant with your forefathers when I took them out of Egypt," which is what we're talking about here. Parshas Mishpatim, at the end of 7 years, you'll set them free. But your fathers did not hearken to them. And anyway, because they didn't hearken, then they didn't allow their freedom for every man and brother. He goes back to and says, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. Watch out in Yerushalayim, because Babylon, because Babel is coming, and they're not coming in a good way. And which is pretty much what happens. What will happen in a sense also to Babel. Babel will also have because Babel he uses Babel here and doesn't work out for Bnei Israel. And then the words of Hashem, I shall return them to the city and shall wage war against it. So this is the first Beit HaMikdash. I often don't hear this is a reason for the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. I'm sort of putting this at the end of not a positive note, because there are some very positive things about an Eved Ivri. As I said, it's supposed to give a certain dignity to people who need the help. And here we see that Bnei Israel themselves had pretty much turned that around and took advantage of their power. And funny thing that I think Hashem probably when Abraham is told, when he's put into the trance and he's told what's going to happen to his 400 years and whatever, they were going to be enslaved. He said that they would be sold, they would be whatever into and they would they'd be treated harshly. And I guess Hashem is basically telling us right there in that scene that I'm going to give it whoever country gets to be your master. I think he realizes that they'll take advantage of the situation. They'll take advantage of your being there, and I think what happens is that the similar situation happens to Bnei Israel when they have slaves. Although there with Paro, we are enslaved to Paro. That's basically what the Haggadah tells us. That comes from Sefer Devarim in there. It was in the 6th chapter. It tells us that we were slaves to Paro. Here we're slaves, probably not to the Beit Din, but we're slaves to the masters. Although on a higher level, probably we were slaves to Hashem. But that's not how it played. played out that we were slaves. And anyway, slavery would not be abolished, not then. Rabbi Sachs talks about that in England, I think was around 1815 or something like that, they abolished slavery. In the United States, it was abolished after a very bloody civil war. And as I've seen from Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, I can tell you an interesting story about it, but he writes about Lincoln, and Lincoln in the second inaugural wonders, and he wonders how the North had its abolitionists, and the abolitionists had their raison d'etre for not having slavery, biblical, and I'm talking biblical reasons. And the South also had biblical reasons for slavery. And so you sort of have this, you have this conflict going on where both sides are praying to the same God, and for that and other reasons, you have to wonder why did the slavery go on? Why was the what was the punishment that was put on the United States for that bloody war in the 1860s to end slavery? And the answer to that, I'm not even sure what the answer is, because pretty hard stuff. But anyway, both sides, the bottom line to that is that both sides felt righteous in its individual cause on fighting for slavery. And I do also remember somebody being in our shul to talked about that if the Southerners had followed Torah law, the slavery would not have been as harsh, and the Civil War may not have been as bloody and harsh either. But that wasn't to be, and I think that's partially because once you take somebody in as a slave, you don't really hire them, but you take them in as a slave, you're very likely going to abuse them in the end, which is what happened in Egypt. Anyway, and on that note, sorry I was a little late. Thank you for your patience and hanging in there. And
Can I just say something?
sure.
Okay, this is for my buddy Mendy in the Gematria. So the Eved, if I'm correct, is 76. And 7 plus 6 is 13, which also equals Ahava. So although B'nai Israel, they had still the concept of an Eved Ivri, maybe it's from our experience in Mitzrayim and stuff, we should at least, Hashem wants us to deal with the Eved with Ahava.
Absolutely. And I think that's what the point of that Haftorah is that they forgot to do that. They
Right.
forgot that. And so your point is valid. And I often don't, usually when I've heard Rabbi Yudin talk about the Eved Ivri often. I've heard others talk about it often. And it should be, it really should be, they always talk about it in more positive terms. But as I always look at it, when I talk to people about it, and I had my partners at Torah Chabrusa, when he would talk about it, I would always point them to that Haftorah, and I'd say, yeah, we failed on it as a people in the end. The people who had the responsibility for the Avadim, for the slaves. We were slavers. We were slaves. And when you, part of the reason we are sent down to Egypt is to remember what it was like to be a slave, what it was like to be a stranger, to what it was like, and to elevate ourselves in that memory. So the Eved Ivri should be a very positive thing. Should not have to be. And as I said, it's almost like the rabbis don't want us to think about that was maybe a reason why, we had our first Tisha B'Av, the first temple. You know, we have to treat the Eved with their people, and the object of this was to elevate the entire process. That was the process, the reason for it. That's also why it's the first mitzvah. Here we were slaves. Now we're we're free. We're elevated, but some people will need help. There's always going to be poor people. That's you see that. Or it says Torah says it. I think the Rambam says it. You see it in everyday life. I mean, we always have poor people. The question is how do we treat them? Do we elevate them up? Or is it a bootstrap experience, or is it? I don't want to get involved in politics. I always criticize certain people when politics creeps into this. So I'll stop there in what I say, because I don't because this is not politics. This is just a, Rabbi Sachs is I think somebody asked, I think it was Tony Blair asked Rabbi Sachs, why is, what was it? He said the book of Leviticus. Why is the book of Leviticus so boring? And Rabbi Sachs's answer to him, and that was his clavrusa, was no politics in it. There was no politics. It's just a lot of laws and do this and do that. And things like that. So you're right on the money. We have to treat it with love, and when we forget and we take advantage of our authority in any way, in whatever job we have, it's not a good situation. Yes, sir.
To throw in my 2 cents, as per, and Rabbi Yudin, like as you said, we had many shiurim about Eved Ivri. His whole this is Rabbi Yudin's way. His whole construct for Eved Ivri is to help reform the Eved Ivri. That's
what I said. It was there's no Department of Correction, Bureau of Prisons.
Right. It's to help him to come
personal,
back,
man to man, person to person. You're right.
And he said the only reason I'm not going to say the name of the person who he always pointed to said, well, the reason that we don't have it is because your wife would not want this person to come into his house, and like you said, would sit down at your table and you have to give him to eat. That construct, unfortunately, would not work today any longer, that we can do this, because most people, there will always be people that would say, I've even heard some politician get up and say, how many people want to take in the migrants will take into our homes? Yeah, there might be a handful of people that might want to do that, but for the Eved Ivri, it just probably would not work today. But really, it's for us to take our fellow Jew and help to reform him and have him come back to Judaism.
I was, when a couple of years ago, I had heard Rabbi Yudin talk about it, and I remember it was in the paper maybe after that, before that, somewhere around that time. I've heard him talk about it so many times that he would say, and I would sit there and think, this guy, remember BM? I won't say the whole name. Very famous Ponzi scheme and the whole routine. Okay, would you take him into your home to reform him? I don't know. Would you take where would you go to? Who would you take into your home to reform? I mean, and besides that, if you had him work it off, I mean, wow, it's a work of all that money that he took. I mean, and you get all of these situations similar to that. I mean, I guess you could say that this is sort of an unworkable a formula in today's world. One of it always strikes me with so many things that go into it, and as I said, this is sort of the short version of the Eved Ivri, because there were, as I said, what happens with the daughters, the maid servants, and all that other thing, and how do you come in and how do you go out, and I mean, I mean, and we don't really hear the whole Gemara from Rabbi Yudin, but he gives us the, as you said, it's an uplifting thing. I also think I've heard Rabbi Yudin say on various occasions, and I have a feeling it's because he visits people in the prison system. There is no rehabilitation in our prison system. It's
That's
punishment.
correct.
And so he basically, I think he's never said it together in the same sentence, but I think this system is just some way of rehabilitation, which is necessary. One thing I didn't mention in the body of it was that there is no, the Ivri does not get on leaving the service, assuming he's allowed to leave the service. He doesn't get a star or a document saying, you're done, you were an Eved, you served your time, and whatever, go out and live your life. That would sort of be like asking a ger, so what were you before? We're not supposed to do that. This is what he is today. He's a new person. And so this is truly for the time that it was made as a revolutionary idea, and even for today's times, it is a revolutionary kind of thought that we have to deal that we don't deal with, but it's something that on many levels we should consider more ways of, as I said, rehabilitation. And I'm not sure that the system works today, taking somebody into your house and things like that, but there have to be ways to do it better than society does it today. Anyway.
Okay, Sam, thank you so
Right.
much. Very interesting. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Hey, Sam?
How
Sam,
you
I
doing,
have,
Rusty? How was the trip down?
good,
How was the trip down?
very
Good
good.
drive?
Yeah,
You enjoying the
Mm.
nice weather?
yep.
It's actually, if it would be 10 or 15 degrees warmer here, I would feel a lot better. Wouldn't feel like I missed the sunshine.
Okay,
I-
guys, I gotta run because I
Go
gotta run.
ahead.
Gotta
Thank
eat
you.
today before
Okay.
tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Everybody.
There is opting
Take
for a
care.
new
Hey,
chapter.
Jay. Hey, Jay.
Take care.
I hope you didn't
Yashikar.
need the tissues.
We're
I hope you
okay.
didn't